Thank you. So item number 5 is the report of the superintendent. So we'll start with the superintendent's update as we usually do. So to everyone this evening and to all our students and teachers, I hope that everybody's February vacation is off to a safe and enjoyable start, and that everybody has a great rest of their week, and that we look forward to seeing everyone when we resume our regular schedule on February 22nd. The majority of tonight's update does relate to our continued efforts to launch hybrid learning, hopefully as soon as this time next month. The environment and indicators for in-person learning continue to improve. So last week, the CDC released its much anticipated and updated guidance for school reopening, which includes particularly pointed advice on how the vaccine should factor into our planning. The CDC does report that, or their report does bring clarity to our planning, and it should help us to sort of push onward with bringing students back to class. Similarly, Everett's COVID-19 metrics, which have long been the biggest reasons for our very prudent approach to reopening, have shown further signs of flattening and declining. From the daily incidence rates to our percent positivity. And so we have much to discuss today, but first, to begin tonight's update, I want to start the way I generally start, which is with some bright spots. So throughout this unprecedented school year, I did want to highlight our EPS art educators who have been really successful in helping our students pursue their passions, even through traditional and digital forms of expression. So the results have been really creative, very impressive. Off the top, we have to applaud Everett High School senior Darren Pierre, who earned a silver key in this year's Scholastic Art Awards. Darren was recognized for his artwork, which is here entitled Desolation. It's an acrylic on canvas that is shown. And we expect to see more from Darren in the coming years as he continues to hone his considerable skills at Montserrat College of Art. In the next slide, you're going to see a 2-minute video that highlights some of the other grades that are happening in our art classes. So at the Cavarian School, teacher Carolyn DeChico has been helping 8th graders make portrait drawings by using their observational skills. 7th graders have studied and used symbolism in works inspired by surrealism. 6th graders are studying world architecture and transforming 2D drawings into 3D sculptures. And at the Parlin School, we have art teachers Lindsay Zaremba and Jill Enos, who developed a gallery walk featuring work from different grade levels. So 3rd graders created abstract drawings, 4th graders made winter snow globes and digital snowflakes with a focus on symmetry. They've studied, foreground, middle ground, made polar bear and snowman drawings. And the 5th and 6th graders have also learned about symmetry by creating digital symmetrical snowflakes. They've done winterscapes and pop art mug drawings inspired by an artist. And they've studied color theory to design warm and cool hand drawings. And then in the grades 7 and 8, they have made name drawings using pattern, contrast, and they studied monochromatic warm and cool analogous and complementary colors as part of a color scheme square lesson. So these are just some of the examples that you're going to see this evening. I just wanted to give you a brief overview of what you're about to see. Thank you so much. So in another bright spot, we wanted to give a quick shout out to the folks at ExxonMobil's Everett terminal for awarding the Everett Public Schools with a generous donation as part of its expansive Good Neighbor Grant program. So it was a pleasure. I got to meet the terminal supervisor, Dean Cockle, at the Exxon's facility. On Beecham Street. And so I just wanted to thank the ExxonMobil facility coordinator, Mary Martell, for all of her help organizing the donation. On behalf of the Everett Public Schools, I wanted to thank all of them for their continued support of our students. So now on to some of our metrics. So as I was mentioning before, we are wanting to talk about the relaunching of schools, and our desire to reopen schools is driven by the encouraging news from the CDC and from our Everett positivity numbers, which I will get to. However, it is also driven by worries for social emotional welfare of students, which is a significant worry that's growing and sort of exacerbating as the weeks and the months are passing. But academically, also, we are seeing the first tangible signs of the limits of remote learning as it relates to student achievement. Right here, you can see in our district-wide K through 8 results from the most recent round of iReady assessment testing. These were released last week. And this preliminary data should be accounted for as we consider, how to approach the remainder of the school year. So I would characterize these results we are sharing tonight as neither, terribly alarming, but also not overly encouraging, even allowing for the obvious variables of the school year. So while I sincerely do believe that we are making the very best of an untenable situation, there are limits to the effectiveness of remote learning for some of our students. And so these scores just serve to remind us that, nothing, no matter how determined and creative the alternative, is a worthy substitute for in-person teaching and learning, especially for some of our learners. We've always known this to be true, and so now we are starting to see some data that actually reaffirms that. And of course, I do want to qualify that testing is but one measure of a district's success. And so it demands careful analysis, but, also a proper frame of reference, knowing that it's just one measure. But the test results during a global pandemic, should certainly be met with caution, but they are still, a reflection of what we are seeing in our classrooms. So these test figures fully reflect the efforts our teachers and students are making in a very difficult environment. And again, I have no regrets about how we have approached the school year to this point. And if our most recent iReady data is one of the trade-offs from our restrained approach, I think that was still, again, the right approach for us to take. But while transitioning to hybrid will not be quick and easy and will not immediately erase the gaps that have started to form in the recent months, I do believe that it is a significant first step in addressing some of the academic shortfalls that some of our students are experiencing. So as is the case with the social and emotional factors, we have to honestly consider this academic data and do what we can to reverse it. And I do believe that seeing our students return to class will help kickstart that process. So for those who may not know, the EPS uses a testing system known as iReady to assess math and reading skills for students in kindergarten through 8th grade. So we completed our winter testing just this past week, and we have developed a district-wide snapshot here to share with you. On this slide, you have two tables showing what are called math and reading placements from 2020 in green and 2021 in blue. So looking at math, the biggest concern is that a greater proportion of our students are 2 or more grade levels below where they should be. Last year, 21.5% of our K through 8 students fell into this category. This year, the figure has jumped to a shade under 30%. So the percentage of students who are at or above grade level in math has also fallen from 32% to less than 27%. The reading placement figures are more consistent year to year, which is a positive, given that we have been in remote since September, or rather last March. In fact, we have seen a small increase in the percentage of students who are at or above grade level, which is great. However, on the other hand of that, more of our students have fallen 2 or more grade levels behind as compared to this point last year. And so this could be demonstrative of, a widening gap. Again, it's just one measure, but it's certainly one that we want to keep our eyes on. In this next slide, whereas the previous slide shows the overall placement of our students, this next slide uses the same data to demonstrate how individual student placement changed from year to year. So as you can see, the majority of students saw no change in their reading or math placement. So while some did show progress, approximately a quarter of our students regressed in reading and or math compared to where they were last year. So the percentage of students showing progress dipped from 9% to 6%. So this is the second year that EPS has utilized district-wide iReady testing, which means we can't show what progress looks like under regular learning conditions, unfortunately. So we don't have historical data to look at. So that is definitely a shortfall of this data that I want to mention. It does, however, provide us at least one benchmark from last year from which to measure our future results. So our look at all of the iReady data is going to be ongoing, and we will share any and all useful information during our future meetings and during our future interim testing. In addition, we also do use a testing system called Edmentum at the high school level. Those results we are currently breaking down to present to you as soon as possible. Again, we'll break that down to see what the disparities are among our different student subgroups as well. So I always like to give an attendance update. So our latest update on attendance shows that the last 4 weeks have yielded the best rates of the year at 95% of our, as 95% of our students have been participating in remote education. So the chart on the right shows a decrease in daily absences, highlighting a steep drop after some initial difficulties that we had in September. As of the 94th day of school, those with attendance rates from 90 to 100% remain consistent. I think every time I present, it's around 5,600 students who fall into those two best categories. And again, it is our hope that transitioning to more in-person instruction will help engage those students who, despite consistently aggressive outreach efforts, which we have been continuing throughout the year, they have been less connected than their peers during remote learning. So even though overall this does signal, great results and attendance of our remote learning, that small population of students that hasn't been attending remains consistent. And despite our outreach efforts, we haven't been able to there's a small portion that we haven't been able to really re-engage. So switching to COVID-19 data, Everett continues to see a rise in total cases, but again, this is cumulative. So like most communities, we are seeing, though, that the curve is showing signs of flattening. So as of February 11th, there were more than 7,000 positive cases in Everett, and we're hopeful that we have seen the end of the surge we experienced from Thanksgiving through January. So far this month, Everett's daily cases are trending downwards to the single digits, as you'll see in this next slide. So here we show sort of the daily ups and downs of the confirmed cases among our Everett residents. And these numbers continue to bounce around fairly dramatically, as you can see, but the floor and ceiling are also dropping over time. So in recent days, the numbers have risen to 40 and have not risen to 40 and have regularly fallen to even below 20. So more impressively, though, again, the green line shows the very steady and noticeable overall decline we have been seeing in daily cases since the end of January. So this chart shows the sharpest decline of two key metrics we've been tracking for several months now, which is the daily incidence rate and the percent positivity. So as you can see, the drop off is very noticeable and dramatic. So last week, in fact, our average daily incidence rate dropped to 5%. And as you can see here, Everett's improving numbers put us at 39th among the Bay State communities that are in the red zone. So during every previous school committee meeting where we have presented this chart, Everett has generally been inside the top 10 or top 15 among red cities. So this is a huge improvement. And it's impossible for us to not be heartened by these statistics, not just in school, but in the overall community. And, you know, we also don't want to lose sight of all of the things that have made these statistics a reality. You know, for example, the consistent use of face coverings and physical distancing. You know, I know the increased testing and now and awareness. So as we begin to look at reopening our schools, I think it is a good time too to remind our families that self-screening is an essential part of our mitigation efforts, as is the distancing and the masking, and it is clearly showing that it's working. And so we are very encouraged by that. And again, for those students who are already in our buildings, we always just want to remind everyone that if you are symptomatic, if your student is symptomatic, to remember to please keep them home, consult with your doctor or health professional, because again, I think this is what's helping our numbers overall in the community go down and will make it easier for us to return to school. So I mentioned the new CDC guidance. So last week, the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention released updated guidance that was aimed at facilitating the rapid reopening of schools. So the framework meshes with our thinking and does help school systems answer sort of these intense calls to get students back into class. So we did obviously look very closely at this guidance, and for us, the biggest takeaway from the report is that the CDC is not affixing specific positivity metrics to a district's ability to reopen. So that, which is helpful because then we are not trying to chase a set number or wait to plunge below a designated threshold before we proceed. So the CDC does allow for a reasonable level of assertiveness in reopening schools. Also, as part of its report, the CDC released its own color-coded system for categorizing counties. So Middlesex County is in the highest category, red, although Everett's metrics are currently a level above that in what is labeled orange. So nevertheless, schools in areas designated red may still consider a limited reopening as long as they can layer multiple safety strategies on in the classroom. And again, this is in lockstep with what we are trying to accomplish here in Everett. And again, that is, sort of a phased reopening in which we waterfall students back to class by grade level under a hybrid plan. So according to the CDC too, elementary classrooms can operate in person at any level of community virus transmission with sufficient mitigation, again, such as masking, physical distancing, all of those safety measures that we've put in place. The document further states that middle and high schools can safely operate in person at any level of community spread if they conduct weekly coronavirus testing of students and staff members. So again, this is all very positive because these recommendations do not conflict with anything that we have been considering. The CDC blueprint, and I'm sure everybody has seen this in the news, does not list vaccination as a key consideration for reopening, but instead labels vaccines as an additional layer of the COVID-19 prevention. So to quote the CDC director, safe reopening does not suggest that teachers need to be vaccinated. So the report also references a CDC science brief, which says that based on available data, in-person learning in schools has not been associated with substantial community transmission. So overall, the report is very heavy on practical recommendations that are aligned with the reopening plan we've developed and that we developed and approved actually last summer. So from guidance on the ventilation to shared spaces to water fountains, classroom designs, CDC's operational strategy really does reflect our planning and what we have seen from districts that have successfully launched hybrid plans. And again, while the CDC guidance is not a mandate, it is undeniably useful. The CDC has been one of the foremost guiding forces throughout the pandemic. So its information is based on science, data, common sense. And in summarizing it, I would echo the sentiments of Randy Weingarten, the president of the AFT, the American Federation of Teachers, who called the new guidelines informed and rigorous. So after looking through them, I do believe them to be appropriate, but still with an eye on safety. So during our last meeting, we did express profound disappointment that the state halted our ambitious vaccination plans in the city of Everett. But we, especially for our school system specifically, and we do continue to hope that our educators across the Commonwealth, not just in Everett, will have the chance to be vaccinated sooner rather than later. But in the meantime, all of us, including our young students, should take heart in seeing that so many of our oldest residents received the COVID-19 vaccine through the work of City Hall. So, the successful clinics that Everett has been holding for residents age 75 and older, are absolutely relevant, I think, to the reopening of schools. During our February 1st school committee meeting, the Everett Teachers Association did speak passionately about multi-generational households where the threat of individuals contracting COVID-19 is especially high. And this is a very valid concern. Students who live with grandparents or older relatives are rightfully concerned about bringing COVID-19 home from school. So, seeing those relatives receive the vaccination is a huge relief and could help being a deciding factor in whether or not they do accept the chance to take part in hybrid learning. And again, while it's not our educators themselves, it is a step towards, building up that herd immunity over time. As we just discussed, the CDC indicates that vaccinations are highly desirable, again, but not essential to reopening the schools. But even as we push ahead with whatever our plan is in regards to hybrid learning, we are not going to quiet our calls for educators to be prioritized by the state and its vaccine rollout. And as this slide shows, which you've seen last time as well, 73% of the respondents to the ETA survey indicated that they would get vaccinated. And I think this is an interesting and encouraging data point. I also wanted to just commend the city for continuing to think of us as it makes its vaccine plans. The state did recently announce that it is subtly changing its prioritization requirements to give cities a little bit of discretion in ensuring, the doses do not go to waste. So to that end, we'll be able to work with City Hall. They've asked us to create a standby list of EPS personnel who might be able to secure spots during the next clinic. And again, the top priority still continues to be our residents 75 and older, our residents 65 and older, with 2 comorbidities in the next group. Still, while this likely means that opportunities for our staff will be limited, it is still hopefully a sign of, again, expanding the accessibility to the vaccine. And we will share more information with our educators as we receive it. So, as we've stated before, Everett is uniquely situated, and we must always make our decisions with, with what is right for us here in Everett. So that being said, we also do not exist in a bubble, and it is important for us to at least understand the context of what is happening around us and the kind of access that other districts may be providing to their students and families. It was cited, I think, this past weekend by the Massachusetts Association of School Superintendents that 2/3 of school districts have some form of in-person instruction for their general education population. On this slide, you'll see, information from a survey of the North Shore Superintendents Roundtable, which is made up of 29 school districts in our area. And so while some of these districts are very different from our own, some are very similar. So this gives us kind of an interesting cross-section of those that are in our general region. According to the survey results released this month, the majority of districts who responded to the survey are in a hybrid model. At the elementary level, the percentage is 61%, and that number climbs to more than 70% in middle and high school. Conversely, the percentage of districts who reported being in a fully remote model are at around 10% or lower. So as such, again, this sampling seems to be consistent with that report of 2/3 of districts providing some level of hybrid learning at this time. So we reached the point clearly where we need to give intense consideration to the social and emotional well-being of our students. I know we've brought that up quite a bit. All of the improving COVID-19 metrics that we shared earlier are as encouraging as they are, do not, kind of assuage our growing concern around issues such as isolation, extended separation from school-based routines, and the comfort that these routines provide to our students. So there are countless reasons why students do need the chance to go back to school, many of which, have just as much to do with their social emotional well-being as with their academics, and have everything to do with their overall happiness and health. Um, so the statistics on this front range from upsetting to kind of dire, and they must be accounted for as, again, we kind of hammer out a workable hybrid plan. So the next two slides highlight just some of the growing amount of data available to us to confront and consider. According to, again, information provided by the Massachusetts Association of School Superintendents, a recent survey heeded the following four insights based on data analysis. So the first, one, student mental health challenges are acute and getting worse. So specifically, 83% of educators surveyed reported observing moderate to severe mental health challenges with students, with 71% reporting that challenges are somewhat worse or significantly worse than a year ago. The second insight is that educators are struggling as much as students. So 84% reported observing moderate to severe mental health challenges with staff, with 85% reporting the challenges are somewhat worse or significantly worse than 1 year ago. The third insight is that districts are relying on a multi-pronged approach to address student mental health issues. So 67% reported that they've implemented a social emotional learning curriculum for students, and 56% offered mental health targeted professional development for teachers. And 49% reported adding counseling, clinical, and therapeutic support to their school communities. And then the fourth insight that has been gleaned from this data is that there are significant challenges and gaps in the mental health safety net that do still exist. So 77% were concerned about worsening conditions for students with existing mental health issues, and 69% were concerned about students presenting with mental health issues who weren't previously on the school's radar screen. And not only do we have to acknowledge this data, we need to, pull it from the background, to the foreground as well. The emotional distress that COVID-19 is causing is very real. And we should consider what we can do to alleviate it as much as we can, as soon as we can. So this slide includes some powerful testimonials that highlight the type of bottom line findings that experts are reporting. So in addition, data from the Centers for Disease Control shows that there has been a 24% increase over the last year in emergency visits for mental health issues among 5 to 11-year-olds, and a 31% surge among 12 to 17-year-olds. And this is not to suggest that successfully addressing the social and emotional needs of our students is achieved by, flipping a switch, going from remote to hybrid. Social and emotional learning is a critical part of what we do every day under any circumstances. So it will have to be an especially ambitious part of our curriculum when we return all our students. And we also already have a current grant that we're working on and plans to support this even in the remote environment. That said, again, I do have no doubt that hybrid learning will have a meaningfully positive impact on our students who do want to come back to school as soon as possible. So at some stage, we need to take in all the information available to us and give it some sort of coherence and purpose. So we can't let these factors, continue to sort of swirl around without kind of corralling them and molding them into a plan. So this slide is meant to kind of give you a visual of our thinking of taking all of this information in. So we have various things to weigh and objectives to meet. So externally, we have the advice from organizations such as the CDC, the Mass Department of Public Health, the Everett Board of Health, the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, to consider in conjunction with the latest COVID-19 metrics. We also have to give voice to our families, whether it is in the form of survey results or feedback from public meetings and gatherings. And layered on top of all of this is the physical safety of our students and staff, and the continued need to ensure that essential health precautions are being vigorously and consistently followed. And then we have to make the critical determination about how to use all of this information to best meet the academic and social emotional needs of our students. And this is not easy, nor does it mean reaching a consensus on every single question relating to our reopening. But we are aiming to be decisive and confident that we are properly at least assessing the situation as it stands right now, and that we are acting in the best overall interests of the EPS. So in simplest terms, the data we have before us, when considered holistically, clearly directs us to move away from the cautious approach we have taken to this point, and to start to pursue a path that brings students and teachers back to class under a hybrid model. So after careful consideration and much debate, we've developed three options for returning to school that are highlighted on this slide. So keep in mind that much of the work needed for our hybrid learning has already been completed. So this ranges from, again, for the procurement of the PPE, cleaning supplies, to checking and rechecking the air quality of our buildings, configuring our spaces to accommodate 6 feet of social distancing. So, I believe that our buildings are ready to welcome back our students. We just have to determine when. And to answer that question, we must make a fundamental decision on how to factor the vaccine into our return as it previously was. So all three of these plans call for students to come back in a tiered fashion. We will return students based on need and grade level. So doing that slow transition in with the aim of bringing back all of our students, hopefully this year, for in-person classes. So again, regardless of which option, we do know that we are going to take the approach in that same transitional way that we've been discussing. The difference in the plan, again, relates to the availability of the vaccine, which we have seen to be outside of our control, and which we now see from the CDC is not necessarily needed to open schools. So under Plan 1, we would begin to waterfall students back to school beginning on March 15th, regardless of how widely available the vaccine is. Under Plan 2, we would wait for teachers and staff to receive the first dose, which means our start date would not be until sometime in April. And then Plan 3 calls for teachers and staff to receive both doses, which means we would not launch a hybrid model until sometime in May. So Plan 1 obviously has the substantial advantage of allowing us to set a date and throw all of our support behind it. This would put us on a reasonably fast track in which we will finalize our hybrid protocols and guidelines, determine how many students are going to opt in or stick with remote learning, determine which grades will return first. All of this would unfold quickly, efficiently, and we'd be able to provide you with a final update at our next school committee meeting. I believe this is our best option. It is the best sort of manifestation of what we presently, again, have sort of filtered in all the information about the pandemic and schools and what we know our students and families need from us. Neither Plan 2 nor 3 does give us the luxury of setting a start date, which does mean our parents would be unable to make firm plans surrounding work and family schedules. We would also leave ourselves open to any variables regarding the vaccine at a time of year when delays are growing more and more taxing. If this year has shown us anything, it's that even those plans laid out by the state are subject to change and will then impact our plans here in Everett. So while we've assigned Plan 2 and 3 with date ranges, I want to still qualify that those are our best guesses based on the information we have regarding when phase 2 of the vaccination will end. So when we and having an appropriate supply of vaccine. So that then would hopefully put us in April. Still, Plan 2, if that is your preference, does offer some middle ground if everything goes according to plan regarding the state's vaccine rollout, and if our teachers do receive that first dose by the end of March, as per the state's current plan. You know, Plan 3 is a little bit more difficult and harder when it comes to helping our families who are currently asking for in-person learning. So this would push us into May, leaving little time to make meaningful impact on our students. Our community has dealt with a tremendous amount of uncertainty during the pandemic, and the patience and the understanding of our families has really been beyond generous. And this includes families who've been long ready for our hybrid learning model to start. So after several weeks of emerging information and these altered trends, not to mention, hours of, debate and consideration, I do unquestionably believe that the time is right to put our hybrid plan to work for our students who want it. Obviously, I'm as anxious or interested in hearing from all of you, but I do feel it is my responsibility to clearly state what I believe is my recommendation. And I do believe that Plan 1 adheres to our unyielding attempts to do what is best for our students and families at this particular moment in time. So lastly, before I open the floor for discussion around those three options, I did want to let our families know that regardless of which option is chosen by the school committee and which is then subsequently negotiated with the union, we will be offering families the hybrid Q&A session starting next week that will be facilitated by building principals and assistant principals to provide families with more information about hybrid learning. So even if we are unable at that time to answer all questions, especially as we again negotiate some of those finer points with our union, we do believe it is important for families to hear from us and our school leaders regarding the information that we do have, which is considerable. So we'll be dividing the Zoom session into 30-minute language sections too. So this resource is available for all of our families, and family liaisons will be on the Zoom to translate questions and responses from our school leaders. So this week we'll be publishing a resource too with the explanation of the basic tenets of hybrid instruction, cohort characteristics and schedules and safety protocols, all of the things that have already, been confirmed, and all of our updated safety protocols are also currently available on our website, which we encourage parents to review these if they have questions about sanitizing, our face covering policy, and more important procedures we put in place to mitigate risks once we return. Building leaders will again be able to answer specific questions based on the layout of their buildings, entrances, exits, outdoor spaces, and special populations, and other questions that families might have at these particular Q&As. So in closing, I bring us back to that previous slide. I would like to open up for any questions as well as discussion regarding our options for return. And item number 2 on the agenda too is to approve the revised reopening plan, which does require a vote from this body. So before I return to formal negotiations with the union, with our finance and negotiations subcommittee, I do think that it's essential to know where this committee stands regarding our plan for return. And I do want to remind everyone again that whatever is decided here is also still not final until we have negotiated it with the union.
Okay, we're going to open this up for questions of the superintendent.
Yes, please.
Okay, with that, I have